All right, let's just jump right in because this is one of those topics you might not have ever thought to ask about. We're talking about dragons. And no, not in some fantasy epic, but right there in the pages of the Bible. It sounds wild, I know, but stick with me because it's actually key to understanding the entire biblical story. I mean, seriously, have you ever been reading along and just stumbled across names like these? Leviathan, this massive twisting sea serpent, Rahab, some kind of chaos monster, and then you get to the book of Revelation, and there it is, a literal seven-headed dragon. What in the world are these things doing in here? Well, here's the thing. The biblical authors weren't trying to write a field guide to ancient zoology. Nope. These creatures are incredibly powerful symbols, and they actually unlock one of the biggest, oldest conflicts in the whole Bible, the cosmic story of God versus chaos. So, let's start with that big question. Why a dragon? Why this specific imagery? Why not just come out and say evil? It really all comes down to speaking a language people would understand. To get across these deep, complex spiritual truths, the writers reached for the most powerful images their world had to offer. And you know what was at the top of that list? The chaos monster. And to really get this, we have to kind of rewire our modern brains for a second. We have to understand this fundamental conflict in the ancient mindset, the battle between the stable, ordered land and the wild, chaotic sea. For them, the sea wasn't a vacation spot with sandy beaches. It was terrifying. It was the source of killer storms, of unknowable, crushing depths, of sudden death. It represented everything that was outside of human control, which made it the perfect metaphor for the spiritual forces that stand against God's good, ordered creation. And this really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have God's good rule, represented by the stable land, a place of life, order, and flourishing. And on the other side, you've got rebellion, represented by the sea, a place of danger, threat, and spiritual opposition. The entire biblical story, from page 1, is the story of this cosmic battle. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. This symbol of chaos doesn't just stay some vague idea. It starts to take on a personality. It evolves all through the Old Testament, and its shadow just gets longer and a lot darker. It starts, in a way, kind of small. In Genesis, it's a deceptive serpent in a garden, whispering lies and introducing chaos into God's perfect world. But by the time we get to Exodus, that serpent figure has grown. Pharaoh, the brutal oppressor of Israel, is called a great Tanin, a river dragon. Then, later in the Psalms and the prophets, it explodes into this cosmic figure, Leviathan, a multi-headed monster that represents all the forces in the universe hostile to God. And finally, in Daniel, entire corrupt, violent empires are pictured as these grotesque beasts rising up out of that chaotic sea. You see the pattern here? The enemy is getting bigger, stronger, and more organized. So, what's the bottom line here? The biblical authors are making a huge theological claim. They're saying that evil isn't just about people making bad choices. No, it's rooted in something much deeper, a cosmic, spiritual rebellion against God and his good world. The dragon is the face of that rebellion. So by the time the Old Testament closes, the stage is set. We know we're in the middle of a war between God and the dragon. But we also have a promise that goes all the way back to the beginning, in Genesis. A promise that a hero, a deliverer, is coming who will finally land the decisive blow, who will crush the serpent's head and end this reign of chaos for good. And that, of course, is the perfect setup for the New Testament and the arrival of this promised serpent crusher. Right from the get-go, Jesus' entire life and mission are framed as a direct assault on the dragon's kingdom. He isn't just a nice teacher with some good ideas. He is presented as the divine warrior, the one who has come to wage war against the forces of darkness and chaos. So how does he actually do it? Well, the Gospels show us this clear four-part battle plan. He literally confronts chaos head-on when he calms the raging sea, the very symbol of the dragon's power, with just a word. He defeats the serpent's original weapon, deception, with undeniable truth. He breaks the curse of chaos by healing the sick, casting out evil, and restoring God's good creation. And then comes the final decisive blow. He goes to the cross. Now, this is the great, beautiful paradox of the story. To the outside world, the cross looked like the dragon had finally won. The hero was dead. But from a biblical perspective,
It was the exact opposite. By willingly entering death, the serpent's ultimate weapon, and then shattering its power through his resurrection, Jesus delivered that head-crushing blow promised way back in Genesis. He mortally wounded the dragon.
So, the decisive battle has been won, but the war isn't quite over yet. For the final act, we have to turn to the last book of the Bible, Revelation, where all of this amazing imagery comes together for one last epic showdown.
Right here, in Revelation, all the masks finally come off. The ancient serpent from the garden, he's explicitly identified as the great dragon. All those beastly violent empires from history, they're shown to be powered by this same dark spiritual energy. But the hero of this final battle isn't some muscle-bound dragon slayer. No, it's the Lamb, who conquers not with a sword, but through his own self-sacrifice. And in the end, the dragon is totally defeated and cast out of God's creation for good.
And this brings the entire epic story full circle. It's just so perfect. The story that began with a serpent bringing chaos and ruin into a garden ends with that dragon being defeated forever. The story that began with humanity being exiled from God's presence ends with humanity dwelling with God in a new city. And that new creation, we're told, has no more sea. The ultimate symbol of chaos is finally completely gone. So you see, the dragon in the Bible isn't really about a literal, scaly monster. It's the face of cosmic rebellion. It's the personification of all the forces that stand against God's goodness, beauty, and order. And the story of the Bible is the incredible story of God's ultimate victory over that chaos. Which, of course, leaves us with one last thought. If this ancient story is really about the ongoing struggle between divine order and destructive chaos, where do you see that very same battle playing out in our world and maybe even in our own lives today?